The Vashri were the most feared creatures in the known galaxy. Every spacefaring civilization knew their name and trembled at the sound of it. They were tall, standing 7 feet at minimum, with skin the color of dark purple storms. Their eyes glowed like dying stars, and their claws could cut through metal like paper. But what made them truly terrifying was not their bodies. It was their minds. The Vashri were hunters. They were raiders. They took what they wanted, and no one in the galaxy had ever stopped them. Their society was ruled entirely by females. Males existed, but they were kept on the homeworld, protected and hidden away like precious jewels. The females were the warriors, the captains, the conquerors. They traveled the stars in massive warships, seeking glory, treasure, and anything interesting enough to claim as their own. The warship Bloodthorn was one of the most successful raiding vessels in the Vashri fleet. Its captain was a warrior named Yura, and she had never lost a battle in her 60 years of service. Her second in command was Nari, a quiet and deadly fighter whose reputation for violence preceded her wherever she went. Together, they commanded a crew of 112 warriors. Each one trained from birth to kill without hesitation. On this particular day, the Bloodthorn was patrolling the Outer Rim, a dangerous stretch of space where weak ships often wandered by mistake. The crew was bored. They had not found worthy prey in weeks, and the warriors were growing restless. Yura stood on the command bridge, her glowing eyes scanning the darkness of space, when her sensor officer spoke up. "Captain, there is a small vessel ahead. It appears to be damaged." Yura leaned forward. "What species?" "Unknown energy signature. The ship design does not match our records." This was interesting. New species meant new opportunities, new treasures, new things to claim. "Set intercept course," Yura commanded. "Prepare boarding parties." The Bloodthorn moved through space like a predator stalking wounded prey. Within minutes, they had surrounded the small vessel. It was tiny compared to their warship, barely larger than a shuttle. Scorch marks covered its hull, and one of its engines was completely dead. Whoever was inside had clearly seen better days. Yura led the boarding party herself. She brought Nari, along with 5 other warriors. They cut through the airlock with plasma torches and stepped inside, expecting to find cowering creatures begging for their lives. That was how it always went. Every species they encountered reacted the same way, screaming, crying, pleading. What they found instead was a small human male sitting in the pilot's chair, eating noodles from a metal cup. He looked up at them as they entered, slurping a long noodle into his mouth. His eyes moved from Yura to Nari to the other warriors, taking in their massive forms, their glowing eyes, their razor-sharp claws. Then he swallowed his noodle and spoke. "Oh, hello. Are you here to help, or are you the other kind?" Yura did not understand the question. "What other kind?" "You know, pirates, raiders, the kind that takes stuff." The human took another bite of his noodles. "I should warn you, I do not have much worth taking. My cargo was emergency medical supplies, but they got destroyed when my engine exploded." "Bad luck, really." The warriors exchanged confused glances. This was not how prey was supposed to behave. Where was the fear? Where was the terror? This small creature was sitting in front of the most dangerous beings in the galaxy, and he was eating noodles. Nari stepped forward, her claws extending. She towered over the human, her shadow swallowing him completely. "Do you know who we are, small creature?" The human looked up at her. "Big? Purple? Scary claws." He shrugged. "I'm going to guess you're not the rescue team." "We are Vashri," Nari growled. "We are the terror of the stars. We are death itself." "Ah." The human nodded slowly. "That does sound bad." He held up his cup. "Would you like some noodles?" "I have extra packets." They are chicken flavor, but honestly, they all taste the same. Nari looked at Yura, completely lost. In all her years of raiding, she had never encountered anything like this. The human was not fighting. He was not running. He was not begging. He was offering them food. Yura pushed past her second-in-command and stood directly in front of the human. She studied him carefully. He was small, barely reaching her chest. His skin was a strange pinkish-brown color, and his eyes were dark and calm. Too calm. Something was wrong with this creature. "What is your name?" Yura demanded. "Dohyun," the human replied. "What is yours?" No one had ever asked Yura for her name during a raid. Prey did not ask questions. Prey screamed and died. This was all wrong. "I am Captain Yura of the Bloodthorn," she said, her voice cold. "And you are now my property." Dohyun blinked. "Your property? I am claiming you. It is our way. When we find something interesting, we take it." Yura leaned closer, her glowing eyes burning into his. "You are interesting, human. You do not fear us." "I want to know why." Dohyun seemed to think about this for a moment. Then he shrugged again. "Fear takes energy. I am very tired. My ship exploded. I have been drifting for 3 days, and I ran out of good food yesterday. These noodles are my last ones." He looked down at his cup sadly. "I was saving them." Yura did not know how to respond to this. The human was not brave. He was not defiant. He was just tired. Too tired to be afraid. It was the strangest thing she had ever encountered. "Bring him," she ordered her warriors. "He comes with us." Dohyun stood up slowly, finishing the last of his noodles. "Okay. Do you have better food on your ship? Because I have to be honest, I am really hungry." Nari grabbed his arm, her claws pressing against his soft human skin. "You will eat what we give you, if we decide to feed you at all." "That seems fair," Dohyun said. "Also, your grip is very strong. I can feel my arm going numb. Could you maybe hold a little softer?" Nari loosened her grip slightly, then caught herself and tightened it again out of spite. But the damage was done. She had listened to him. She had responded to his request. A Vashri warrior had just shown consideration to Prey, and she did not understand why. They marched Dohyun through the corridors of the Bloodthorn, and every warrior they passed stopped to stare. Word spread quickly through the ship. The captain had claimed a human, and the human was not afraid. Some warriors laughed at this. Others were curious. A few were disturbed in ways they could not explain. Yura brought Dohyun to a small room near her own quarters. It was normally used for storage, but it would serve as his cell. She pushed him inside and stood in the doorway, studying him one last time. "You will stay here," she said. "Tomorrow, I will decide what to do with you." Dohyun looked around the small room. There was a thin mattress on the floor and a single light in the ceiling. He nodded slowly. "This is nicer than my ship, actually." "Thank you." Yura slammed the door shut and walked away, more confused than she had ever been in her entire life. She had claimed countless treasures over the years, weapons, artifacts, rare creatures from distant worlds. But she had never claimed anything like this human. Something told her that this small, tired, noodle-eating creature was going to be more trouble than she could possibly imagine. She was right. Life on the Bloodthorn was nothing like Dohyun had expected. He had heard stories about alien raiders before. Everyone in the galaxy had. They were supposed to be cruel and heartless, monsters who enjoyed pain and suffering. But the Vashri were not monsters. They were something stranger. They were lonely. Dohyun realized this on his 3rd day aboard the ship. Yura had given him permission to walk around certain parts of the vessel, mostly because keeping him locked in a storage room was boring. 2 guards followed him everywhere, their glowing eyes watching his every move. But Do-hyun did not mind. He was used to being alone and having company, even scary purple company. It was actually quite nice. He discovered the mess hall on accident. He was wandering through the corridors, looking for something to do when he smelled food. The smell was not good. It was like burnt metal mixed with old socks. But it was food, and Do-hyun was curious. The mess hall was a large room filled with long tables and benches. About 30 Vashri warriors sat eating their meals in complete silence. No one talked. No one laughed. They just ate their gray, unappetizing food and stared at their plates. It was the saddest meal Do-hyun had ever seen. He walked to the food counter, where a tired-looking Vashri was serving portions of gray paste. She looked at Do-hyun with confusion. "You are the human," she said. "Yes," Do-hyun replied. "What is this food?" "Nutrition paste. It contains all required vitamins and minerals for optimal warrior performance." Do-hyun looked at the paste. It looked like wet concrete. "Does it taste good?" The server stared at him as if he had spoken a foreign language. Taste is not relevant. Function is relevant. This made Do-hyun very sad. Food was one of the great pleasures of life. It brought people together. It created memories. It made bad days better and good days wonderful. These warriors had clearly never experienced any of that. "Can I see your kitchen?" Do-hyun asked. The server did not know how to respond. No one had ever asked to see the kitchen before. She looked at the guards behind Do-hyun, who shrugged. Their orders were to watch him, not to stop him from looking at kitchens. "Follow me," the server said. The kitchen was large but mostly empty. There were machines that processed raw materials into paste, refrigeration units filled with basic ingredients, and very little else. No spices, no herbs, no variety of any kind. It was a kitchen designed for survival, not for pleasure. But Do-hyun saw potential. He saw vegetables that could be roasted, grains that could be cooked properly, and proteins that could be seasoned. He saw the ingredients for real food, hidden beneath years of neglect and ignorance. "May I cook something?" he asked. The server looked at him like he was insane. "You want to cook yourself? With your own hands?" "Yes, where I come from, cooking is an important skill. It is how we show care for others." The server did not understand this concept at all. But she was curious, and curiosity was stronger than confusion. She stepped aside and let Do-hyun work. For the next 2 hours, Do-hyun moved through the kitchen like a dancer. He chopped vegetables, seasoned proteins, and cooked grains until they were fluffy and light. He found dried herbs in a forgotten corner and used them to create a simple sauce. By the time he was finished, he had created a large pot of stew that smelled absolutely wonderful. Word spread through the ship faster than engine fire. The human was cooking. Real cooking. With flavors and smells and everything. Warriors began appearing at the mess hall door, drawn by the scent like moths to light. They stood in confused groups, not knowing what to do. This smell was completely foreign to them. It made their stomachs feel strange. It made their mouths water. They had no word for what they were experiencing. Do-hyun served the stew himself, filling bowls and handing them to warriors who looked at him with suspicious eyes. Nari was one of the first to arrive, pushing through the crowd with her authority. "What is this?" she demanded, looking at the bowl in her hands. "It is stew," Do-hyun said. "It is food made with care. Please, try it." Nari looked at the brown liquid, at the chunks of vegetables and meat floating inside. It looked dangerous. It looked foreign. It looked absolutely delicious. She took a small bite. Her eyes went wide. Her hands began to shake. She took another bite, then another, then another. Within seconds, she had finished the entire bowl and was holding it out for more. "What have you done to me?" she whispered, her voice trembling. "I fed you," Do-hyun said simply. "That is all." Around the mess hall, similar scenes were playing out. Hardened warriors, killers who had never shown emotion in their entire lives, were crying into their bowls. Actual tears were rolling down their purple faces as they experienced flavor and comfort for the first time. They did not understand what was happening to them. They had no framework for these feelings. Hana, a young warrior known for her fierce temper, cornered Do-yoon after the meal. She pressed him against the wall, her face inches from his. "What did you put in that food?" she growled. "What poison makes warriors weep?" Do-hyun looked at her calmly. "It is not poison. It is salt, herbs, and thyme. It is food made with intention. Your paste is designed to keep you alive. My stew is designed to make you feel alive. There is a difference." Hannah did not release him. Her claws were out, pressing lightly against his shoulders. "Vashri, do not feel. Feeling is weakness. Weakness is death. Is that what they taught you?" Do-hyun asked softly. The question hit Hana like a physical blow. She stepped back, her eyes wide with something that looked like fear. But it was not fear of Do-hyun. It was fear of herself. Fear of the feelings rising inside her that she had been taught to suppress since birth. She turned and fled the mess hall without another word. She did not leave her quarters for 3 days. Captain Yura heard about all of this, of course. She heard about the crying warriors and the strange stew and her, second in command, asking for second helpings like a hungry child. She did not know what to make of it. She visited Do-yoon that night, entering his small room without knocking. He was sitting on his mattress, reading something on a small datapad he had found. "You are causing problems," Yura said. Do-yoon looked up. "I made dinner. Is that a problem? My warriors are confused. They are experiencing things they do not understand. This is dangerous on a warship. Maybe they are experiencing things they were never allowed to understand," Do-yoon replied. "That is different from dangerous. That is just sad." Yura stepped closer, her shadow falling over him. "You are very bold for a claimed creature. Do you not know that I could kill you with a single blow?" "I know," Do-yoon said. "But you will not. How do you know this?" "Because if you wanted me dead, you would have killed me already. You kept me alive because you are curious. And now you are more curious than before." Do-hyun smiled slightly. "I think you like the stew too." Yura said nothing. She had indeed tried the stew, alone in their quarters, where no one could see her. She had cried too, though she would never admit it. She had cried for reasons she did not understand, for feelings she could not name. "What do you want, human?" she asked finally. "I want to keep cooking," Do-hyun said. "I want to teach your crew that life can be more than just survival. I want to see what happens when warriors learn to feel." "Why?" "Because I am stuck here anyway. I might as well do something useful." Yura stared at him for a long moment. This human was the strangest creature she had ever encountered. He was weak, small, and completely helpless. Yet somehow, he had done more damage to her crew in 3 days than enemy fleets had done in decades. "Fine," she said finally. "You may cook. But if you cause real harm to my warriors, I will end you myself." "Fair enough," Do-hyun said. "Now, do you know if anyone on this ship likes gardening? I have some ideas about fresh vegetables." Yura left his room shaking her head. She had commanded the Bloodthorn for 60 years. She had faced death countless times, but nothing had prepared her for a human with a cooking pot and absolutely no sense of fear. The next morning, the ship's engineer, Soman, appeared at Do-hyun's door. She was carrying construction tools and wearing an expression of extreme confusion. "The captain says you want a garden," she said. Do-hyun smiled. "Yes, I think it would be good for everyone." Soman did not understand what that meant. But she was a Vashri, and she followed orders. If the captain said the human gets a garden, Then the human gets a garden. She had no idea that this simple garden would change everything. News traveled fast through Vashri space. Every ship had communication links with others, and warriors loved to gossip despite their claims of being above such things. Within weeks, everyone knew about the Bloodthorn and its strange human passenger. The stories were wild and contradictory. Some said the human had magical powers. Others claimed he had poisoned the entire crew with alien drugs. A few whispered that he was actually a demon wearing human skin, sent to destroy the Vashri from within. But one detail remained consistent in every telling. The human was not afraid. And the Bloodthorn was changing because of it. 3 Vashri warships arrived at the Bloodthorn's position on a cold morning in deep space. They came out of faster-than-light travel, like predators emerging from shadows, their weapon systems active and their intentions clear. This was not a friendly visit. Captain Yura stood on her command bridge, watching the 3 ships surround her vessel. She recognized the lead ship immediately. It was the Red Fang, commanded by Captain Jiwan, one of the most aggressive commanders in the entire fleet. Jiwan and Yura had never been friends. They had competed for promotions, for glory, for everything a Vashri warrior desired. Captain Jiwan is requesting communication, her officer announced. Put her through. Jiwan's face appeared on the main screen. She was older than Yura, her purple skin scarred from countless battles. Her eyes burned with a fierce light that had never dimmed despite her age. Yura, Jiwan said, her voice like grinding stone. I have heard interesting stories about your ship. Stories are often exaggerated, Yura replied calmly. Perhaps, but I wish to see for myself. I wish to see this human who makes warriors cry. Jiwan leaned forward. And if he is as interesting as they say, I will challenge you for him. Yura felt cold anger rising in her chest. Challenging for claimed property was an ancient Vashri tradition. It was legal. It was accepted. And it was almost always fatal. You would risk your life for a curious creature? Yura asked. I would risk my life for far less, Jiwan replied. I will board your ship in 1 hour. Prepare the arena. The connection ended. Yura stood motionless for a long moment, her mind racing through possibilities. She could defeat Jiwan in combat. Probably. She was younger and faster, though Jiwan had experience and cunning on her side. But that was not the problem. The problem was that she did not want to kill over this. She did not want to fight at all. This realization shocked her more than Jiwan's challenge. When had she started thinking like this? When had violence stopped being her first answer to every problem? She knew when. It had started with stew and a garden. The arena was located in the lower section of the Bloodthorn. It was a circular room with high walls, designed for ritual combat. Hundreds of warriors could watch from elevated platforms, and today, every platform was full. Word had spread that the captains would fight, and no one wanted to miss it. G1 arrived with her own warriors, 20 of them, all armed and armored. They pushed through the Bloodthorn's crew with arrogant sneers, looking down at their hosts as if they were weak and pathetic. Some of the Bloodthorn warriors growled at this disrespect, but no one acted. Not yet. Yura stood in the center of the arena, dressed in traditional combat armor. Her claws were extended, gleaming in the artificial light. Across from her, Jiwan was removing her ceremonial cape, revealing the powerful body beneath. Before we begin, Jiwan announced loudly, I wish to see the human. Bring him here. Nari looked at Yura, who nodded slightly. A moment later, Doheen was escorted into the arena by 2 guards. He looked around at the massive crowd, at the 2 armored captains, at the blood-stained floor beneath his feet. Oh, he said quietly. This does not look good. Jiwan stalked toward him, circling like a predator examining prey. Doheen stood still, his hands in his pockets, watching her with calm curiosity. "You are small," Ji-won said. "Weak, fragile. I could break you with one hand." "Probably," Do-yoon agreed. "Yet they say you have no fear. They say you have changed an entire warship with cooking and gardening." Ji-won laughed, a harsh and ugly sound. "How pathetic the bloodthorn has become. Crying over food. Growing plants like farmers. You have made them weak, human. I have made them happy," Do-yoon said simply. Ji-won stopped laughing. "Happiness is weakness, is it?" Do-yoon tilted his head slightly. "You have traveled across space to fight and possibly die for the chance to own me. You have brought 20 warriors and 3 warships for this purpose. You must want something very badly. But is it me you want? Or is it what I represent?" The arena went silent. Every warrior was watching now, listening to the small human speak to one of the most dangerous captains in the fleet. "What do you represent?" Ji-won asked slowly. "Change, possibility, the idea that things could be different." Do-yoon took a step toward her, which made several warriors gasp. "You heard the stories about the bloodthorn. You heard that warriors here are learning to feel, to enjoy life, to question the old ways. And you came here to destroy that. Not because it threatens you physically, but because it threatens everything you believe." Ji-won's eyes narrowed. "You speak too much, human. You asked me a question. I am answering it." Do-yoon sat down on the arena floor, crossing his legs beneath him. "I will not run. I will not fight. I will not beg. If you want to kill me, you can. But first, I want to ask you something." "You want to ask me something?" Ji-won was so surprised that she almost laughed again. "Yes, I want to know why you became a warrior." The question hung in the air like smoke. Ji-won stared at Do-yoon with an expression no one could read. For a long moment, she said nothing. "What kind of question is that?" she finally asked. "An honest one. You have spent your entire life fighting, killing, conquering. You have won countless battles and earned great glory. But why? What were you hoping to find at the end of all that violence?" Ji-won opened her mouth to answer, then closed it. She tried again, but no words came. The truth was, she did not know. She had never thought about it. She had simply done what she was told, what she was raised to do, what every Vashri was supposed to do. The idea of asking why had never occurred to her. YURA watched this exchange with growing amazement. She had expected combat, blood, death. Instead, she was watching her rival struggle to answer a simple question from a sitting human. "I became a warrior because that is what Vashri are," Ji-won said finally. But her voice lacked conviction. "Is that your answer? Or is that the answer you were given?" Do-yoon looked up at her with gentle eyes. "You know, on my home world we have a saying. A life without questions is a life half-lived. I think maybe the Vashri have been half-living for a very long time." The arena was completely silent. Warriors who had come expecting blood were now standing motionless, caught in something they did not understand. Some of them were thinking about their own lives, their own choices, their own answers to the question the human had asked. Ji-won stood over Do-yoon, her claws fully extended, her muscles tense. She could kill him right now. One strike. It would be easy, but her arm would not move. Something inside her had frozen, locked by a question she could not answer. "I withdraw my challenge," she said suddenly. Gasps echoed through the arena. Withdrawing a challenge was almost unheard of. It was considered shameful, cowardly. But Ji-won did not look ashamed. She looked confused, lost, like someone who had been walking in darkness and suddenly glimpsed light. "I need time," she continued, speaking more to herself than to anyone else. "I need to think about what you have said." She turned and walked out of the arena, her warriors following in stunned silence. The 3 warships departed an hour later, Leaving the Bloodthorn alone in space once again, Yura approached Dohin, who was still sitting on the arena floor. "What did you do?" she asked quietly. "I asked a question," Dohin replied. "That is all I did. No one has ever defeated Jiwan, not in battle. Not in anything. I did not defeat her." Dohin stood up slowly, brushing dust from his clothes. "I just made her think. The hardest battles are always inside ourselves." Yura looked at him for a long moment. She was beginning to understand something about this human. He did not use weapons or strength or speed. He used words and questions and silence. He found the cracks in people's armor and gently pushed until they opened. It was terrifying. And it was beautiful. "Come," she said finally. "I think the crew needs to see you. They need to know you are safe." As they walked out of the arena together, Yura realized that she was not walking like a captain escorting a prisoner. She was walking like a friend beside a friend. When had that happened? When had this small human become something more than property? She did not know the answer. But for the first time in 60 years, she was willing to ask the question. 6 months passed on the Bloodthorn. In that time, the ship transformed into something no Vashri had ever seen before. The mess hall, once silent and grim, was now filled with conversation and laughter. The garden that Soman had built in the cargo hold had grown into a beautiful space of green leaves and colorful flowers. Warriors who once lived only for violence now spent their free time learning to cook, to grow plants, to create things instead of destroying them. Doyun had become something strange and wonderful aboard the ship. He was not a captain or a warrior. He held no official rank, but everyone respected him. Everyone listened when he spoke. The young warriors came to him with their problems, and he helped them find answers. The older warriors came to him with their memories, and he helped them make peace with the past. Nari was one of his most frequent visitors. The fierce second-in-command, known throughout the fleet for her deadly skills, had developed a habit of visiting the garden late at night. She would sit among the growing plants, breathing deeply, saying nothing. Do-hyun would often join her, sitting quietly nearby, giving her space to feel whatever she needed to feel. One night, she finally spoke. "I had a sister," Nari said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Her name was Bora. She was younger than me, smaller, gentler. She was never meant to be a warrior." Dahan listened without interrupting. He had learned that the Vashri needed silence when they opened their hearts. They had spent so long hiding their feelings that speaking them aloud was painful, like opening wounds that had never properly healed. When we came of age, we were required to face each other in ritual combat. It is tradition. Sisters must prove their strength against each other before they can serve the fleet. Nari's hands were shaking. Bora did not want to fight. She begged me to pretend, to make it look real, but not hurt her. But the elders were watching. They always watch. If we had faked it, both of us would have been executed for weakness. She paused, struggling with the words. Do-hyun waited. "I killed her," Nari continued, her voice breaking. "I killed my own sister because tradition demanded it. Because weakness means death. Because that is what Vashri do." Tears rolled down her purple face, glowing slightly in the dim light. "I have killed hundreds since then. Enemies, prisoners, anyone the captains ordered me to kill. But Bora is the only one who haunts me. Her face is the one I see when I close my eyes." Dahan moved closer and sat beside her. He did not touch her because he had learned that Vashri physical contact was complicated. But he sat close enough that she could feel his presence. "What happened to Bora was not your fault," he said gently. "You were both victims of a system that values strength over love. You did not create that system. You were born into it. But I followed it. I enforced it. I have trained young warriors and sent them into the same rituals that killed my sister." Nari looked at him with desperate eyes. How do I live with that? You change, Do-hyun replied simply. You cannot undo the past, but you can decide what kind of future you want to build. Every day you choose kindness over cruelty. You honor Bora's memory. Every young warrior you protect from the old ways is a victory against the system that destroyed her. Nari stared at him for a long moment. Then, slowly, she reached out and took his hand. It was the first time she had voluntarily touched anyone in gentleness since her sister's death. How do you know these things? She asked. You are so young, so small. Yet you speak like someone who has lived 1,000 years. I do not know very much, Do-hyun admitted. But I know this. Pain is not weakness. Feeling is not weakness. Love is not weakness. The Vashri have been told lies for so long that they have forgotten the truth. You are not killing machines. You are people. And people are allowed to hurt, to cry, to remember the ones they have lost. Nari squeezed his hand tightly. The High Council would execute both of us for speaking like this. Probably, Do-hyun agreed. But the High Council is far away, and this garden is right here. Let them worry about the future. Tonight, we are just two people sitting among flowers, being honest with each other. For the first time in 40 years, Nari smiled. It was a small smile, fragile and uncertain, but it was real. Meanwhile, Captain Yura was struggling with changes of her own. She had commanded the Bloodthorn for 6 decades, leading raids and collecting glory. It was all she had ever known. But lately, she found herself questioning everything. The ship encountered a damaged civilian vessel from a species the Vashri typically raided. It was a transport carrying families, merchants, ordinary people with no military value. In the old days, Yura would have ordered her warriors to board, take what they wanted, and leave the survivors to die in space. That was the Vashri way. But when she gave the order to prepare boarding parties, something unexpected happened. Her warriors hesitated. Captain, one of them said carefully, these are not enemies. They are not warriors. They are just people trying to survive. Since when do Vashri care about such distinctions? Yura demanded. The warrior looked at the floor. Since the human taught us that strength can mean protecting the weak, not only destroying them. Yura felt something shift inside her. She looked around the bridge at her crew, at warriors who had once been ruthless killers. They were all waiting, watching, hoping she would make the right choice. She thought about Do-hyun, about his stew and his garden and his gentle questions. She thought about how he had changed her ship without ever raising a hand in violence. She thought about what it meant to be strong. Send repair teams, she ordered quietly. Help them fix their ship. Then let them go. The crew burst into activity, but not the kind of activity Yura was used to. Instead of preparing weapons, they were preparing tools. Instead of boarding parties, they sent engineers. The damaged vessel was repaired within hours and sent on its way, its passengers confused but grateful. That night, Yura visited Do-hyun in his garden. He was watering his tomato plants, humming a soft song she did not recognize. You heard what happened today, she said. I heard. Do-hyun did not look up from his plants. How did it feel? Yura considered the question. Strange, wrong, like I was betraying everything I was taught. And also right, like I was finally doing what I should have been doing all along. She sat down heavily on a bench Soman had built. What have you done to my ship, human? Do-hyun finally looked at her. I have done nothing. Your warriors made their own choices today. They chose mercy instead of violence. They chose kindness instead of cruelty. That came from them, not from me. But you planted the seeds. Perhaps? He smiled slightly. But seeds only grow in soil that is ready for them. Your warriors were ready, Yura. They were waiting for someone to give them permission to be more than killers. I just showed them that permission was possible. Yura was quiet for a long moment. The High Council will hear about this. They hear about everything. When they learn that the Bloodthorn spared prey instead of taking it, there will be consequences. Yes, Dalyun agreed. There probably will be. You do not seem worried. I am very worried. But worrying does not change what is coming. We can only control what we do right now in this moment. And right now, your warriors are better people than they were yesterday. That matters regardless of what happens tomorrow. Yura looked at this small human, this strange creature who had walked onto her ship eating noodles and somehow turned her entire world upside down. She had claimed him as property. She had planned to study him, perhaps trade him, eventually discard him. Instead, he'd become the most important person on her ship. You are very frustrating, she said finally. I know, Dahyun replied cheerfully. But you like me anyway. Yura wanted to deny it. She wanted to maintain the cold distance that captains were supposed to keep from their subordinates. But she was tired of pretending. She was tired of being what the Vashri expected her to be. Yes, she admitted quietly. I do like you. I do not understand why, but I do. Dohyun handed her a ripe tomato from his garden. Here, you should eat something. You always forget to eat when you are stressed. Yura took the tomato and bit into it. The flavor was bright and fresh, completely different from the ship's processed food. She closed her eyes and let herself enjoy it, just for a moment. Thank you, she said. You are welcome. They sat together in the garden as the ship's artificial lights dimmed for the night cycle. Outside, stars burned cold and distant. Somewhere far away, the High Council was probably already planning their response. But here, in this small space of green-growing things, two very different beings had found something that neither of them had words for. It was fragile. It was uncertain. It was beautiful, and it was only the beginning. The summons came on a morning like any other. The message was short and official, bearing the seal of the Vashri High Council. Captain Yura was ordered to return to the homeworld immediately. She was to bring the human with her. No explanations were given. None were needed. Yura gathered her officers in the command room. Nari stood at her right side, her face hard, but her eyes showing fear. Somin was there, along with Hana and a dozen other senior warriors. They all knew what this summons meant. The council has heard about our actions, Yura said calmly. They know about the civilian ship we helped. They know about the changes on this vessel. They consider us corrupted. What will they do? Hana asked. To me? Execution, most likely. I have violated our oldest traditions. Yura paused. To the human? I do not know. But it will not be pleasant. The room fell silent. These warriors had spent months learning to feel, to question, to hope. Now they were facing the consequences of that growth. Dohyun stepped forward. He had been standing quietly in the corner, listening. May I speak? Yura nodded. I want you to know that I do not regret anything, he said, looking around at the gathered Vashri. These months with you have been the best of my life. I came here as a prisoner, but I'm leaving as a friend. Whatever happens on your homeworld, please remember that what we built here was real. It was good. No one can take that away from us. Nari's eyes glistened with unshed tears. Several other warriors looked away, struggling with emotions they still did not fully understand. We will not let them hurt you, Somin said fiercely. You are one of us now. I appreciate that, Dohyun replied. But I do not want anyone to die for me. Promise me you will not do anything foolish. No one promised. How could they? This human had taught them that some things were worth fighting for, worth dying for. He had shown them a better way to live. They were not going to stand by and watch him destroyed. The journey to the Vashri homeworld took 2 weeks. During that time, something strange happened. Other ships began appearing alongside the Bloodthorn. First 1, then 2, then 5, then more. By the time they reached their destination, 17 warships were flying in formation with Yura's vessel. "What is happening?" Do-hyun asked, staring at the view screen in amazement. Yura was equally confused. She opened communication channels and found herself speaking to captains from across the fleet. Some she knew, others she had only heard of. All of them had the same message. "We heard the stories about your ship," one captain said. "We heard about the human and his questions. Some of my warriors have been asking questions too. We want to see what happens next." Another captain, a young female named Mina, who commanded the ship Nightfall, was more direct. "The old ways are dying. Everyone knows it. The High Council clings to tradition because tradition keeps them in power. But the warriors are tired. We are ready for something different." Do-hyun listened to these conversations with growing amazement. He had hoped to change one ship. He had never imagined that his ideas would spread beyond the Bloodthorn's walls. "You did this," Yura told him quietly. "You started a revolution without even trying." "I just made stew and asked questions," Do-hyun replied. Still dazed, "Sometimes that is all it takes." The Vashri homeworld was beautiful in a harsh, dramatic way. Massive mountain ranges covered its surface, and ancient fortresses clung to cliff faces like stone eagles. The sky was dark purple, matching the skin of its inhabitants. This was where the Vashri had evolved, where their warrior culture had been born countless generations ago. The High Council chamber was located in the largest fortress, at the very top of the tallest mountain. Yura and her crew landed their ships in the valley below and made the long climb on foot as tradition required. Do-hyun walked beside her, his small human body struggling with the thin air and steep slopes. "You could have stayed on the ship," Yura said. "No," Do-hyun replied, breathing heavily. "I need to see this through. Whatever happens." The council chamber was vast, carved from black stone that seemed to absorb light. 7 ancient Vashri sat on elevated thrones, their bodies ancient and powerful. At the center sat the matriarch, the supreme leader of all Vashri, over 300 years old and more feared than any warrior in the galaxy. Yura knelt before them. Tradition demanded it. But she noticed that her warriors remained standing. They had not knelt. Neither had the warriors from the other ships who had crowded into the chamber behind them. "Captain Yura," the matriarch spoke, her voice like cracking ice. "You have been accused of weakness, corruption, and betrayal of Vashri traditions. You have allowed your crew to become soft. You have spared enemies who should have been destroyed. You have permitted an alien creature to poison the minds of your warriors. How do you answer these charges?" "I answer that the charges are true," Yura said clearly. "But I reject the idea that they represent wrongdoing. My crew is not weak. They are stronger than ever, because they have learned to think for themselves. The enemies we spared were innocent civilians who posed no threat. And the human did not poison anyone. He simply showed us a different way to live." Murmurs rippled through the gathered warriors. No one had ever spoken to the council like this. The matriarch's eyes burned with cold fury. "Bring the human forward." Do-hyun was pushed toward the front of the chamber by council guards. He stood before the matriarch, this small, fragile creature, facing the most powerful being in Vashri civilization. "You are the source of this corruption," the matriarch said. "You have turned loyal warriors into questioning fools. You have spread ideas that threaten everything we have built. For this, you will be made an example. Your death will remind all Vashri what happens to those who challenge our ways." Do-hyun looked up at her ancient face. He saw the power there, the authority, the centuries of absolute control. But he also saw something else. He saw emptiness. "May I ask you something before I die?" he said. The matriarch seemed surprised by this request. "You wish to speak? You dare to address me?" "I dare. I have nothing to lose." Dahyun paused, then asked the question that had ended conflicts before. "When was the last time you felt happy?" The chamber fell completely silent. Even the matriarch's guards stopped moving. "What did you say?" The matriarch whispered. "Happy, content, at peace." "When was the last time you felt any of those things?" Dahyun gestured at the black stone walls, at the harsh throne, at the centuries of tradition pressing down on everyone present. "You have ruled for 300 years. You have conquered countless worlds. You have absolute power over billions of lives. But are you happy? Have you ever been happy?" The matriarch stared at him. Her mouth opened, then closed. For the first time in living memory, the supreme leader of the Vashri had no words. "I think you have not," Dahyun continued gently. "I think you have never felt joy or love or peace. I think you have spent 3 centuries being powerful, but never being satisfied. And I think, deep in your heart, that something is wrong. That this is not how life should be lived." The old ruler's hands were trembling. "You know nothing of me, human. You know nothing of our ways. I know that your warriors are tired. Look behind me. Look at their faces. They want more than endless violence. They want connection, meaning, purpose beyond destruction. They want to feel alive." Dahyun spread his hands. "I did not create this desire. It was always there, buried under generations of tradition. I just gave it permission to exist." Something cracked in the matriarch's ancient eyes. It might have been rage. It might have been something else. She rose from her throne and descended the steps toward Dahyun, her massive form towering over him. "If I kill you now," she said quietly, "will these ideas die with you?" "No," Dahyun replied without hesitation. "The questions are already planted. The feelings are already growing. You cannot kill an idea, especially one whose time has come." The matriarch stood motionless for a long moment. Behind Dahyun, 17 ships worth of warriors waited, watching, hoping. The future of an entire civilization hung in the balance. Then, slowly, the ancient ruler did something no one expected. She laughed. It was a strange sound, rusty from centuries of disuse, but it was real. 300 years, she said, almost to herself. 300 years of ruling through fear, and a small human with questions defeats me in minutes. She looked at Yura, at the gathered warriors, at the faces full of hope and uncertainty. The old ways are indeed dying. I see that now. Perhaps it is time to let them die. The revolution that followed was not bloodless. Some council members fought against change. Some traditional warriors refused to accept new ways. There were conflicts, struggles, painful transitions. But the momentum was unstoppable. Too many Vashri had begun asking questions. Too many had tasted happiness and refused to give it up. 2 years later, the galaxy looked very different. The Vashri were still warriors, still proud, still powerful. But they were no longer raiders. They had become protectors, defenders of trade routes, builders instead of destroyers. Their ferocity was now channeled into protecting the weak instead of preying upon them. Dahyun still lived on the Bloodthorn, which had been converted into a diplomatic vessel. His garden had grown to fill an entire deck. Warriors from across the fleet came to visit, to learn, to remember the human who had changed everything. Captain Yura, now Ambassador Yura, still commanded the ship. She still claimed Dahyun as her own, though the meaning of that claim had transformed into something neither of them fully understood. Something warm, something gentle, something neither Vashri nor human had words for. One evening, as they sat together in the garden watching stars through the transparent ceiling, a young warrior approached them with a question. "How did you do it?" she asked Do-hyun. "How did you change an entire civilization?" Do-hyun thought about this for a moment. Then he smiled, the same gentle smile he had worn on the day he was captured, eating noodles in a broken ship. "I did not change anything," he said. "I just asked questions and made soup. Everyone else changed themselves." The young warrior looked confused, but she nodded and walked away to think about his words. Yura watched her go, then turned to Do-hyun with affection in her glowing eyes. "You always say that, but we both know it is not entirely true." "Maybe not," Do-hyun admitted, "but it sounds better than saying I got lucky and things worked out." He reached over and took her hand, something he never could have done 2 years ago. "The truth is, I was just being myself. I was tired and hungry and lost, and I did not have the energy to be afraid. Everything else followed from that." "Perhaps that is the secret," Yura said thoughtfully. "Fear takes energy. Without fear, we have energy for other things. Better things. Perhaps." Do-hyun squeezed her hand gently. "Or perhaps the universe just needed someone to remind everyone that cooking, gardening, and asking questions are more powerful than weapons. The pen is mightier than the sword, as my people say." "You did not use a pen." "No, I used a soup ladle." He grinned. "Basically the same thing." Yura laughed, a sound that still surprised her every time she heard it. Somewhere in the ship, other warriors were learning to laugh too. Somewhere in the galaxy, more questions were being asked. And somewhere in the great darkness of space, the Vashri were becoming something new. All because one tired human had refused to be afraid. The end.